Welcome back to the channel, Latin American and Caribbean News Now. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you would like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, this afternoon's topic is Kamla's US-approved dragon gas license. Is Trinidad still independent? This is a very important topic in light of what we're seeing happening in the realm of geopolitics. Now, the United States has once again granted Trinidad and Tobago a license to access Venezuela's Dragon gas field, but only after Washington's approval. Why does a sovereign Caribbean nation need permission from the US to work with its neighbor? And that's a very important question we have to ask ourselves. In this episode, we break down the geopolitics behind the Dragon gas deal, from Keith Rowley's earliest success in securing the license to Kamla Persad-Bissessar's renewed US-approved agreement. Has Trinidad traded its independence for access to gas? And what does this say about sovereignty and foreign control in the wider Caribbean? This is something that is very, very interesting. Now, do you think Caribbean nations are truly independent or still under Washington's thumb? I want you to ponder these questions as we explore this very, very interesting topic for this afternoon. Now, coming from the Trinidad Express newspaper in Trinidad and Tobago, we have here the story that was given yesterday. The Attorney General, Dragon Alive Again. That's the title of the story. Attorney General John Jeremy says the Dragon gas deal has come alive again, announcing yesterday that the United States Treasury Department has granted Trinidad and Tobago an Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, license to negotiate with Venezuela for the development of the Dragon project. Now, that is interesting that the United States seeks to benefit from this deal, yet it's using Trinidad as its puppet to negotiate with Venezuela because it has an unpopular president, what Washington describes as an authoritarian president there. Very important that we understand that the United States now is hiding behind Trinidad to gain access to Nicolas Maduro, even though Nicolas Maduro and Trinidad also are not on good terms because Maduro understands that Trinidad is being used by the US to carry out its imperial undertakings. Now, Jeremy noted that the license is the first in a three-tier approval process and includes conditions designed to ensure that US companies secure a commercial stake in the deal. This initial tier of license is set to expire in April next year, which is not really understood. Why is it so short? That the license that has been granted to Trinidad is so short. Now, we understand that it has the Dragon gas area has trillions of cubic of gas, oil and gas in that region, right? I'm not an oil person, I'm not a petroleum expert, so I don't even understand the trillion cubic, right? But I leave that up to the oil and gas experts. Now, speaking at a news conference at the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs at Government Plaza in Port of Spain, Jeremy said he was confident the benchmarks will be met within 6 month time frame, as he described the deal as a commercial win-win for all parties involved. But he's going to say further on that he cannot disclose for purpose of privacy and secrecy. He cannot disclose the terms, the conditions of the agreement, which, what are they hiding if Trinidad is a democrat in a democratic society, which we believed it is, or perhaps was? Why doesn't he have the permission to disclose the conditions of the contract? Remember now that you're talking about a puppet state, you're not talking about two business enterprises, but perhaps our nation states are now corporations. They're no longer nation states in which the people hold power. Now, the United States benefits from this arrangement, Jeremy is saying. There are terms and conditions in the license which ensure that US companies benefit, Jeremy said. And there are tiers as to exactly what they should benefit. Trinidad obviously stands to benefit, and to a certain extent, of course, the people of Venezuela will benefit. Now, that is a lot of loaded words. The United States, is going to benefit, according to him. Trinidad is going to benefit. But the Venezuelan people who own that oil and gas area, the Dragon gas field, that they will benefit to an extent. Now, why use that expression, to an extent? It suggests that there are limitations on how the Venezuelans are going to be benefiting from this oil and gas deal. That is what it's implying. And this is not something that is good. It means, therefore, that Washington has ulterior motives. Now, remember now that Trinidad is only being used as a pawn in this whole situation, in this whole debacle. He said the OFAC license granted on Wednesday was the result of an application submitted by the United National Congress government on May 19th. On April 8th, then Prime Minister Stuart Young announced that the United States had revoked Trinidad and Tobago's license to develop the Dragon gas field with Venezuela, which I understand that Trinidad spent over $120 million, my understanding, for this license. Now, for those of you who don't understand the Dragon gas license, this is a license that was granted to Trinidad, and I think with the sort of not the complicity, but with the green light of the United States. The United States had given the Trinidad the green light to work with Venezuela, working through like the Shell company, and I can't remember what other oil company that they were going to work with, so that they could be able to dig up gas, to produce gas and oil in that Dragon field area of Venezuela. Now, this license has been in the works since 2016, but because of the sanctions that the United States has imposed upon Venezuela from 2016 on the first Trump administration, it has strained whether or not that agreement could have moved forward. So that was a strain. Washington was actually deliberating and, seemed to have been playing a game with this agreement. Now, and that is the whole point, that if Trinidad is or were an independent sovereign nation, why should Washington be engaged in such an agreement? Shouldn't they be able to independently craft and to negotiate independently this agreement without Washington's involvement? But it's to show you that the Caribbean region is not independent, that we were moved from the rulership of Great Britain to now we are under the colonial or the neo-colonial rule of the United States of America. Indirectly, we are outposts of colonial outposts, that is, of the United States. And this oil and gas, this Dragon gas deal, is unraveling this truth, this uncomfortable and brutal truth to Caribbean citizens, and particularly to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I hope that they're waking up to understand that their ministers of government really are puppets or pawns of the United States of America. Now, Jeremy announced yesterday, came just over a week after Persad-Bissessar met with United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the State Department in Washington, D.C. So he's the one who gave her the green light, but only for 6 months. Why for 6 months? Why such a short time to develop this sort of agreement? Okay, Jeremy said that the new OFAC license authorizes the governments of the United States and Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, that's the NGC, energy giant Shell, that's PLC, and Futura Clara Limited to engage in negotiations under the government of Venezuela and Petróleos de Venezuela for the development of the Dragon gas field. So the United States has a bounty on the head of Nicolas Maduro, as they have linked him to drug trafficking, that he's a drug trafficker. He is an organized, he participates in organized crime. That is what Washington has alleged. Now, if you are seeing that there's a narco trafficker, but they're trying now to use Trinidad to negotiate with a narco terrorist, now, does that make any sense? Right? Does that make any sense? If indeed Maduro is a narco-terrorist, is a drug trafficker, as he has been alleged by Washington to be, why is Washington using Kamla Persad-Bissessar to negotiate with a so-called criminal, with a so-called narco-terrorist? Why? How does that make Washington look? Because if he's a terrorist, then don't have any negotiations with him. It just should suggest to you, it should indicate to you that Washington doesn't care once it's making its money and it's getting its way. It does not care if it's negotiating with a terrorist, with authoritarians, with dictator. It does not care. Okay? Now, Jeremy yesterday opted not to say if the government had already initiated talks with Venezuela on the situation. Why? Why? Listen to what Jeremy is saying, the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. I might not have said we began negotiations with Venezuela, but I have reasons for saying that the Dragon gas deal is alive. And what I mean by that is that we might not have sat around the table. No one has gone to Caracas, but that does not mean to say that there has been radio silence between Trinidad and Venezuela. I'm just not able to comment on it this morning, he said. And he's saying that he cannot speak on the matter, okay, for purposes of privacy. Now, what privacy? What privacy is there when he's representing the public's interest, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? Because they sent him there, or sent Kamla Bissessar there, the administration, to take care of matters. Right? Now, listen to something that I find a little dangerous that Jeremy is saying. I don't see it as a negative that the United States has a stake, a commercial stake, albeit through companies, US companies, and that is expressed in the license. I don't see that as a negative, as a matter of fact. I see it as an incentive. This is what Jeremy, the Attorney General, is saying. I sort of missed my reading. So he's seeing it as an incentive and not as a problem that, I don't see that as a negative. As a matter of fact, I see it as an incentive, a powerful incentive for all the parties affected to work together to ensure that there is success at the end of the day for this project. But the Venezuelan people are going to be benefiting from it to an extent. Now, talk about independence of Trinidad, sovereignty of Trinidad, which they don't have the true sovereignty. Jamaica doesn't have any true sovereignty. None of us in the Caribbean region, Latin America, really have true sovereignty. Now, the U.S. has granted, this comes from the AP, the U.S. has, for those of you who don't know, the AP is the Associated Press, and this was published yesterday. The U.S. has granted Trinidad and Tobago permission to negotiate a gas deal with neighboring Venezuela without facing any U.S. sanctions, the Caribbean nation's Attorney General said yesterday. So the U.S. has to grant Trinidad and Tobago sanctions, even though Trinidad and Tobago is not doing anything wrong, right? Trinidad and Tobago, as we know, as far as we're concerned, as far as we are aware, is not listed as a narco state as Venezuela is. So why does Trinidad have to be getting us permission from the United States in order to, actually negotiate with a so-called another independent state, which is Venezuela. Why? Why does Washington have to interfere in this process? Now, we have 6 months to negotiate with parameters, Jeremy said at a news conference. You have to hit targets with respect to the US and their posture with Venezuela. So all of this depends on the posture that the United States has with Venezuela. So as far as we know, we don't know if in that, a part of the conditions for the contract, for the agreement, for the dragon gas agreement, we don't know if the regime change is inherently imbibed, is infused in that agreement. We don't know, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago don't know, the citizens of that twin republic, all right, don't know. That is dangerous. What if in that agreement, US bases, military bases ought to be placed in Trinidad? And that is why Jeremy is saying that the conditions cannot be made public. That is what he's suggesting. That is what he's implying. Okay? So Trinidad and Tobago, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago need to rethink their position, need to reflect, need to ponder on what is happening. Seriously, too, on really what is happening. Okay? Seriously need to ponder. The fact that the United States has written conditions, and Jeremy is suggesting that the people of Trinidad will benefit, the people of the United States will benefit, and the Venezuelans to a certain extent. And the fact that the conditions cannot be made public suggests that Washington is on a quest to continue warring with Venezuela. And eventually, it seems to me that regime change is a part of that new license, that new dragon gas agreement. What do you think? Please let me know. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. And for those of you who'd like to make your monetary donations, you can send it to my Cash App, the $MZ Talk 9. The $MZ Talk 9, TUCK 9. That is the code of my Cash App. Thank you so much for joining. Adios. Hasta luego.